Good morning, you guys. Good to see you all. I want to invite you to open a Bible with me at this time to John chapter 2. John chapter 2 is where we are this morning. And as you turn there, I wonder if you've ever given much thought to the fact that anytime there's a new leader in a place, maybe it's in your workplace, you got a new boss, or you attend a school in that institution, got a new principal. Maybe it's a church, they got a new pastor. Maybe it's a government position and there's someone new in that position, a coach, you name it. Anytime there's somebody new in a leadership position, typically what will happen is those first few statements, those first few actions that leader takes really sets the tone for what their leadership and the experience of their leadership is going to be like. Right? You know what I'm talking about? I remember back in the summer of 2022 when I became the pastor here, I was kind of aware of this as I was beginning to pastor, and so I'm sure you all remember the first sermon I ever preached here. You guys want to tell me what it is right now? No, you don't even remember that, right? Psalm 23 was the text I preached from, and because I thought it was really important to make it very clear that Jesus is the chief shepherd of his church. He's the lead pastor, and he will never fail you. He will never leave you. He is always faithful, right? And I knew that was going to be so important for us just to be thinking about as a church, and we always want to keep that at the forefront of our minds, right? There's been a lot of different things that each person, including myself, would want to put forward, and those first few moments are really significant moments. They set the tone. And what I highlight that for is because today, what you and I are looking at in John chapter 2 is Jesus' first act that's recorded that he does after he's begun to gather people as his disciples to follow him. So what he's doing is this first act of his ministry. And so the question then becomes in our minds, well, what kind of tone will he set? What will the experience of his leadership be like? What is he setting out to do? All right, so this is what we're looking at here in John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. So read along with me, beginning in verse 1. On the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. And the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. And when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour is not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. We see in verse 11, if you look down there, John calls this the first of his signs. You'll want to pay attention to that because the gospel writer John consistently refers to the miracles Jesus does as signs. And we'll look at that here in just a second. But all of the signs that Jesus will do in his life and in the gospel of John, he's going to heal a blind man. He's going to walk on water. He's going to feed 5,000 people. He's going to raise a man, Lazarus, back to life. He's going to heal a crippled man. Out of all the different signs that he does, why this one as the first sign? Why this one as the first sign? If you're anything like me, you read this and you're like, wow, this is pretty cool. but it kind of feels like a party trick or something, like, well, here's water, here's wine, and you're like, wow, that was really cool, Jesus, and it just kind of maybe gets you thinking like, he's a pretty neat guy, or he can do some cool things, like why this one? It kind of feels like a strange miracle if you really think about it. Well, it's actually really significant, and I'm not alone in thinking that. There's a really, he's no longer with us, he died in 2011, a guy named Reynolds Price. He's like an English professor at Duke University. But he wrote this about this passage, and I thought it was really insightful. He said this, he said, if you're inventing a biography of Jesus, so you're making it up, you're inventing a biography of Jesus, that is, you're just making up stories of Jesus to get across his power and glory, who would invent as the inaugural sign of Jesus' career a miraculous solution to a mere social embarrassment? But of all the signs he could do, why this one as the first one? Well, I propose to you, it's to show us that Jesus is not simply bringing a recycled version of what has always been, but an entirely new kind of life of lasting joy. What he's bringing is not the same as before, it's better, and it will last. It will last. Stick with me on this. The first scene of this story, we're going to look at this through the tension points of the story. The first scene of our story shows us that our crisis in life is a stage for Jesus to show us the newness that he brings. Look at verses 1 through 5. This is where we're looking. We're going to just read verses 1 through 3 here. But we're going to see here that your crisis in life is a stage. It's a stage. Again, on the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee. So John is wanting you to kind of tie up this day with the events that just happened. Jesus was baptized. He started calling his disciples. We saw last week he's saying on the next day this, the next day this, the next day this. Here he says on the third day. So he's tying these all together. These are happening in close proximity to one another. There's a wedding in this little tiny place called Cana in Galilee. This is a small community. Everybody would know everybody sort of idea. And Jesus is invited to this wedding with his mother Mary and the disciples. And then in verse 3, we get the problem. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." There is drama at the wedding. And as we all know, nobody likes dramas at their weddings, right? We want it all just to go perfectly as planned. But that's not what's happening here. This was a really special event. I know weddings are still a special event, but we need to kind of grasp how significant a wedding like this was. Because again, this would be like maybe Forest Falls. Think of a small community. Everybody knows everybody. If you live there, I don't know if you guys all know each other, but I would imagine maybe you would know other people who live there. And so if somebody's having a wedding, the whole town would be there. The whole town would be there. And it would be not just like some of your Saturday afternoon that you would have to give up. This is a week-long event. A week-long event where everybody would get together and they would celebrate this new bride and groom getting married, and they would all walk home at the end of that together under this canopy. It was like this really cool ordeal, okay? And interestingly, though, unlike our culture, there was no honeymoon, and instead, the couple did an open house celebration for a week. But they hosted it. Imagine you getting married and you invite the whole town over for a week. Right? Anybody want to bring that back? Right? Anybody up for that kind of tradition for your wedding? No, not at all. Right? That's the last thing we would want to do. All this to say, this is a huge deal, a huge social deal, and we don't want drama. But we are told Jesus and his disciples and Mary are all there attending this wedding. They're probably at some level close in relationship with this person, and the groom is kind of the center of attention in this story. See, the groom was supposed to provide all the finances for this feast, especially the wine. It's unlike our culture. Traditionally in our culture, it's the bride's side of the family that pays for the wedding. In this society, the groom would pay for everything, okay? And one of the most expensive and important aspects of this wedding would have been the wine. It would have been the wine. It was expected for all the guests. He was supposed to ensure that there was enough for the entire week. You see, wine in the ancient Near East was not just a drink. It was a symbol of joy. It was a symbol of joy, a symbol of a festival, of celebration. Right? You can see this in the Bible, places like Psalm 104. Wine is a symbol of joy. It's not just a drink. And so for him to not be able to provide adequately for all of his guests, this would have been a very embarrassing thing. You would never live this down. Everybody would know that happened, and it would kind of mark your life from there on out. Like, man, he couldn't provide what everybody else is supposed to provide. I think it's hard to grasp this, and so I was thinking about this. Like, today's the Super Bowl, you know? Are you guys excited about the Super Bowl today? Not at all. I hope both teams lose. It's like the worst day of my life. But nonetheless, like, you're probably going to go to a Super Bowl party, I imagine, or maybe turn it on. I don't know. But Super Bowl parties are a big deal. Just imagine you had a bunch of people over your house today to throw a Super Bowl party. And right before kickoff, your power goes out. You're like, well, that's weird. And you call the electric company, and they say, yeah, you haven't paid your bill in over a year, right? So they cut you off. And you have to tell everybody what happened, right? I mean, you're probably not going to tell them because you'd be so embarrassed, wouldn't you? Right? Everyone came over to watch Super Bowl, and you can't deliver on the thing that they're all there for. Right? This is a similar type of situation, although pales in comparison to something like a Super Bowl. Right? This is this guy's wedding, and he needs to provide, but he can't. It's running out. And so here's the crisis. Mary, with urgency, just plainly says to Jesus, they have no wine. They have no wine. What does he say? Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. And his mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Do whatever he tells you. Show of hands, how many of you have ever responded to your mom that way before? Just especially guys, have you ever said this to your mom? Responded woman, right? Glad no hands are up, right? If I had done that, I would get punched in the mouth maybe. I don't know. I'm just kidding. I told people in the first service, my mom's like the most gentle person in the world. I would probably just heard from my dad later, right? I mean, but this is kind of a weird interaction. Why is he calling his mom woman? Right, well, this sounds really cold to us, but the truth is, this word that Jesus is using is gently intending to distance himself from his mother for a particular reason, okay? What's happening here? Well, Jesus is doing something. He's indicating to her that he is not under his mother's earthly authority. He must live under his Father's heavenly authority. So his life, he's letting her know in this moment, is lived by a pattern that is timed by the purpose of God, his Father. Right? In other words, Jesus is going to start performing miracles, you guys. It's going to reveal his glory in different ways, but it's not going to be at the request of anybody on this earth. Right? Even his mother, whom he deeply loves, doesn't have like a foot in the door for special, situations. All that he does in his life will be directed by his heavenly Father. And so Mary's response, look at it. What is her response? It's to do what? Just expectantly look to her son. She just expectantly looks to him. She doesn't say, how dare you, I'm your mother. She doesn't even respond to him. She responds to the servants and just says, whatever he directs you to do it. She has this sense of trust, this sense of expectation that he is going to do what is the best thing to do. Right? She has this expectation. See, in the face of this crisis, this is her response, to trust him. I wonder, when you're facing crisis, what is your response? What's your response in those moments? Guys, our crisis is a stage. Our places of need where we're going, God, what do we do here, are a stage to once again look to Jesus and trust him. Once again, redirect our eyes and be expectant of what is possible. I mean, I was thinking about how throughout history, like detective stories and novels are always the most popular. Like I grew up, I was like an old soul as a kid. I grew up reading like the Hardy Boys, or my mom would watch Matlock, and I would love to watch the last 5 minutes of Matlock because everything would get resolved really fast, or maybe Murder, She Wrote, or there was a PBS show called Sherlock, or there's Lincoln Lawyer now. I mean, there's so many shows about a guy who's a detective or a lady who's a detective, right? We love our detective stories. And the reason we love those stories is because each episode begins and it presents a problem, a crisis. And you love watching because we sit there and go, oh man, how is Sherlock going to solve this? The whole point of the story is just to be expectant that it's going to get figured out, and the joy is watching it unfold. It's to see like, oh man, how did they know that? How did they do that? In the same exact sort of way, that's true of our lives. If you know Jesus, if you walk with Jesus, when you're in a moment of crisis, there is this sense that we have when we trust him, where we become expectant of like, what is he going to do? We just sang this morning, everything I need, I know my Father has it. I know he'll provide. Well, when you need the provision, do you sit there and go, I'm expectant, right? It might not be exactly what you were hoping for, exactly what you wanted, but you know how good he is, right? So if you've followed him for a while, you know this. But the problem is you forget this. You also forget this. But every single problem, every crisis, your need, your weakness, your lack, your fear right now is an opportunity to marvel at Jesus. For what? What would happen in that moment? Well, that's what we see in the second part of this story. Your crisis is a stage to what? Experience joy in the glory of Jesus. To experience joy in the glory of Jesus. Look at verse 6. Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each one holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, what will he say? I know you know, but that's like the tension in the story. This is where the tension leads you. What's he going to say? This must have been so stressful for these servants. I mean, just think about this. In verse 7, Jesus says, my solution to this problem is for you to go fill up those jars where people have been washing their hands and just bring it to fill it up, bring it to the master of the feast. He doesn't say empty the jars and then fill them up. He says top them off. Right? Kind of gross, kind of strange. Don't miss how stressful that would be, right? What do? They trust Jesus, probably in their confusion. If I'm them, I'm thinking, Jesus, we don't have a water problem, we have a wine problem, and the kind of water we want is not even that kind of water. But they just trust him, and they bring this liquid from the jars to the master of the banquet. This guy would be like the head waiter. That's who this person would be. This master of the banquet, he would be called in to take care of the distribution of food and drink and all those kinds of things at a large social occasion. And so these servants would kind of be like, this guy's my boss, right? I need to do a good job. So the guy takes it, he drinks it. The question is, what will he say? And the tension in the story is going to be relieved by his words. So again, what does he say? Everyone serves the good wine first. And when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. What does he say? Every groom brings out their best wine first, and then the worst, as people get a little loosened up. But you have brought out wine that is better than what you started with. Think about this. This guy has no idea there's even a problem. The guy grabs him, kind of puts his arm around his shoulder, makes this announcement. This guy's amazing, right? All the other grooms, they pour out all their money into having the best wine first. But what we just experienced is even better than what this guy could provide at his best. Do you see what's just happened here? That the focus here is that the climax of the story is on the quality of the wine. It's on how good it is. And it's better than the best thing you could provide. It's better than the best thing you got. Right? The groom doesn't even know this is a problem. The master doesn't know where this wine came from. But the disciples, Jesus' mom, Mary, the servants, they know. They know where this came from. Think about this. Jesus has just worked a quiet miracle just for them. Just for them. I don't know if you ever had sweet moments like that with Jesus. Have you ever had sweet moments like that with Jesus? Maybe it didn't feel this dramatic, but nonetheless, you saw the glory in Jesus in some sweet way, and it just felt like a private event. You're just like, wow, he did that? Jesus provides the wine. That's the climax of the story. He provides the wine when the groom couldn't provide it. So what's he doing? What is the groom supposed to do? Well, he's supposed to provide the wine. And so in doing this, he saves the groom from shame. He saves the groom from social embarrassment. So his first sign, his first miracle is to save this other person's embarrassment and to just continue to bring more life to the party. Right? Notice this. It's an experience that brings joy, but it's a party. There was already joy. But when Jesus comes along and he works his miracle, the joy is even more heightened. It gets even better. Think about that. Here is Jesus starting his ministry saying, you guys, if you're going to follow me, I don't bring a famine. I bring a feast. Right? If you're following me, this is not a funeral. This is a festival. Right? That's what following Jesus is. I mean, he has these 6 jars. That's 150 gallons turned into the finest wine. That's a big party. That's a big party. So what's happening here, you guys? Well, it's really important to establish here, especially as we go through the rest of the Gospel of John, what John calls this. I said it in the beginning, but he calls this a sign. He doesn't call it a miracle, and he calls it a sign for a very particular reason. And the reason is because you and I know that when we come across a sign, it's not telling you so much that you've arrived. It's telling you to keep going. It tells you you're on the right path, but it doesn't say that's the thing. I mean, when I take my family and we go on road trips, we go to Montana to visit my family or something, we drive through Nevada, and once we get to the border of Nevada into Utah, right, there's always that sign, welcome to Utah, right? You know what I'm talking about? Just imagine that you've never been to Utah, and I was like, you got to go to Utah, it's amazing. And you take off and you drive to Utah and you get through Nevada and you get all the way to the Utah border and you stop at the sign that says, welcome to Utah, or whatever it says, right? And you get out with your friends and family or whoever you're with, and you get a great selfie in front of the Utah sign, right? And you're like posting it to whatever you're on, and you go, hey, we made it to Utah. Utah's amazing. And then you turn around and you drive back to Southern California, right? And I was like, so how was Utah? And you're like, oh, it was all right. It looked like Nevada, looked a lot like Nevada. But like, well, did you not see, the Great Salt Lake or whatever school in Utah, right? Do all these national parks like the Bryce Canyon or Zion National Park or something. And you're like, no, I mean, we saw the sign and here's the photo and that was it, right? I'd be like, man, you don't understand how life works, do you, right? I mean, that's just telling you you've made it, but keep going, right? It's just telling you you're not lost, right? You're on the right track. That's what a sign does. And so John is saying this miracle is a sign. It's not the destination. The point is not that there was just some more wine. It's pointing you to something. It's telling you you're not lost. You're on the right track. Keep going. But it's not the end destination. And that's so important to realize because this then is telling you, this is pointing to you. When Jesus does this miracle, it's telling you something about him. He's glorified. It's pointing to something that's very true about him in a specific way. What is it pointing to? Well, I want you to see this morning that this miracle is pointing to Jesus in a specific way. And that way is that he is the true groom of his bride that will never fail to provide the lasting joy that your heart is longing for right now. It's pointing to that. Did you know Isaiah 25 talks about a wedding feast in heaven one day? And it should be on the screen, look at how it describes that wedding feast. On this mountain, the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats, the finest of wines. And on this mountain, he will destroy the shroud that enfolds all people, the sheet that covers all nations. He will swallow up death forever. The sovereign Lord will wipe away the tears from all the faces. He will remove his people's disgrace from all the earth. The Lord has spoken. What do you notice about that passage? It emphasizes the quality of the food, the quality of the wine. It's just saying, you think this is good? What Jesus brings is far better than anything you could ever create or find in this world. His first miracle is pointing us to the joy and gladness that is found in having him as our groom. It's the gladness that's found when Jesus, no offense to you guys, when Jesus really is the husband of your life. That the one that you are meant for. This is what we see in his first act. Jesus' work at its core. What should you expect to experience from his leadership in your life? He's all about bringing joy, and his joy lasts. Pastoring during COVID in metropolitan Portland, Oregon was not easy, okay? It was hard. And my wife and my 15th wedding anniversary was coming up in the summer of 2021, and we were like, you know what sounds great? Maui. Okay, we'd never done that before. It was a very special treat for us. And we went to Maui for 8 days without any kids, right? It was glorious. It was I'm not exaggerating, it was the greatest 8 days of my life, okay? We did nothing but like sleep and eat great food and sit by water and read books and talk and just sit back by water again and eat great food. That's all we did, right? Our ideal vacation is you do nothing, right? You just relax. And that's what we did. And so that final morning of our vacation, we woke up, walked the beach, saw the sunrise, and then we flew back. And as soon as we landed in Portland, we got a phone call that Gus, who at the time was in second grade, Gus ran into a pole on the playground and split his head open. So we get home, hugging our kids, look at the owie, and we go, okay, yeah, ER time. I find myself in the ER the moment I get back. So we start with a sunrise in Hawaii, we end with an ER visit. And I was sitting there going like, the vacation is over, right? I mean, it was just like a clear mark. It's done, right? It is past. And I don't know if you've ever experienced something, maybe not that dramatic, but you've ever looked forward to something because you knew it was going to bring you joy? Something like Hawaii. And so you soaked it up. You drank in every last drop of that joy, but now it's just a memory. It's just a memory, isn't it? And the saying is true. Don't be sad it's over. Be glad it happened. You know that saying? It's a good saying. It's true. Right? Yes. But it was once again another reminder that our joy always runs out in this world. I mean, this guy, this groom, he just had his hide saved from all the embarrassment. He didn't even know it. But I'm certain there'd be future moments where he couldn't provide. He couldn't make the mortgage payment that month. He couldn't afford his kids the things that they needed. He couldn't pay for college or, the vacation or whatever it is, right? The thing that's going to bring somebody joy. And that's just like us, right? We're again reminded that our moments of joy feel just like that. They're just moments. They're here, they're gone, they're memories. Guys, many of you, I'm sure you've gone looking for joy, and you've been looking for it all week, right? And I don't know what it is, but you know what I'm talking about, right? You looked for something, whether it was a relationship or a substance or whatever, and it felt good for a time, or you thought it was the thing, and then finally you go, no, I'm going to keep looking. Joy in this world is like trying to hold water in your hands. It's there for a moment, and then it's gone, right? This is one of our biggest problems in life. It doesn't last. It doesn't work. So what do we do? What do we do? Well, I'm telling you, this story is holding up Jesus as the answer to your joy crisis. It's holding him up to you, saying, do you have that problem? There's a reason for that. It's because your joy was not meant to be found in that thing. It's meant to be found in this person. I was talking to somebody earlier this morning where they were talking about how they used to have a problem with wine and how problematic that is. And I could say, I can resonate with that. I used to have a problem with wine too, And I said, what really ministered to me was that psalm where the psalmist says, you, God, have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and their wine abound. The psalmist is saying, you got all the best food, you got all the best wine. God, you've put more joy in my heart than this world can offer anybody else. This is what we're talking about. This is what Jesus comes and does. He is the answer to our crisis. There's nowhere else to go. There is an unending festival-like joy that only Jesus can provide. So finally, maybe the most important question of this whole passage is, what will it cost you? Or better put, just what will it cost to have that kind of joy? What will it cost? Look at the disciples. When they see this, the glory of Jesus in this moment, they respond with belief, but it costs them nothing. It costs them nothing. But look back to verse 5. I skipped a verse and maybe you thought nothing about it, or maybe you're asking yourself, hey, why did we skip over that? Verse 5, what does it say? Jesus, in his response to his mother, he says, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. Why does he say that? It feels really out of place. Well, why, during a wedding feast, would Jesus be thinking about his hour? His hour referring to the end of the gospel account when he will pray that high priestly prayer right before he goes to the cross, and he will say, Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son. He's talking about going to the cross. What's going on here? What's this sign pointing to? Well, guys, think about it. If you're Jesus' age and you're at a wedding and you're single, what are you thinking about? If you're engaged and you're at a wedding, what are you thinking about? Even if you're married and you're at a wedding, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about your wedding, aren't you? Right? You're thinking about how you would hope to be married someday. If you're engaged, you're thinking about, man, we're going to be married someday, and we're not going to do this, and we're going to do this, and that kind of thing. And if you are married, you're like, remember when we were married like that? Right? Interestingly, though, Jesus was never married, at least in the way that we think of marriage. He never had some 30-year-old woman linking arms with him walking through this world, and that's for a very, very important reason for you and me. And that's because the whole design of his life is to go to a cross and lay down his life for his future bride. He has a bride, but it's not some woman in this world. It's every person from every tribe and tongue and language that would ever come to the saving knowledge of him, come to this place in their life where they're like, you are the one that I've been longing for. You're the one I've been waiting for. You are the better groom. This is who he is. You're the bride, if you know him. This is why he was never married, is because his wedding is coming one day still. And we are not there to celebrate it yet. This is what we see in the book of Revelation. We see this bride coming down out of heaven, adorned for her husband, and she's beautiful. And what does Revelation say makes her so beautiful? It's her holiness. There's no more sin there. She's perfect in every way. And so the question then remains, what will it cost to be there? What will it cost to feast at that table one day on that wedding day? What will it cost for that wedding to happen? Well, it's not a financial cost. It's not a financial cost. Jesus says to his mother, in response to her statement, the wine has run out, he says, I'm not ready to die. He's saying to his mom, I'm not sure how aware you are of how costly this will be for me. To provide the joy this wedding needs will begin to set into motion the great revealing of who I am. My glory is going to start being revealed if I provide joy for this wedding right now, and that will ultimately lead to my death. But good news, because to bring joy to my wedding will require my death, will require that hour. See, why does it cost him his life to have his own wedding in heaven one day with you? Why would it cost Jesus that? Well, for there to be joy at his wedding where there's this beautiful and holy and glorious bride, there needs to be a price that's paid so that he can bring a bride to his altar. That's what this verse means about the jars. There's 6 stone jars, the kind used for ceremonial washing. For there to be a glorious and pure bride, there needs to be a washing. There needs to be some kind of cleansing. And so throughout the Old Testament, we see that this cleansing comes through these rituals, through these things that they do, through sacrifices of animals for the spilling of blood. And so now for his wedding to take place and the joy for his bride to occur, Jesus would have to be the one to shed his own blood. That's why he sits down at that Last Supper and he picks up that cup and he says, this wine represents the new covenant. Covenant, marriage language. Covenant in my blood. In my blood. For the forgiveness of your sins. His blood spilled becomes the wine poured out. Guys, do you see this? The lasting joy of the wedding. The wedding that your heart is actually longing for this morning, it will only come through the sorrow of his hour. So right now in Cana, when his mom simply says, they have no wine, he's thinking about that cup that he will drink with you. But he's first having to think about that cup that he will drink at Calvary, in order to purify you so that you could have that kind of joy forever with him. Guys, do you see what this passage is all about? John's going to tremendous lengths to describing how new everything is. This is the better wine. This is the best of quality. And that's telling you something special, that Jesus provides not only the best wine, he brings the best. He's bringing something new. Something new has come. The former things are beginning to pass away. You don't need those ceremonial jars anymore. The new is coming. Your crisis is a stage to experience newness. Your unsatisfied and frustrated pursuits for joy in this life, when you get to those places and you're like, why did it not work? Why did it run out? Why did I have to take Gus to the ER? Whatever it is. It's God's grace saying, oh, your joy was never meant to be found in Maui. It's meant to be found in me. It's meant to be found in me. Guys, a new day is here with new opportunity, with new possibility. That is true. It's always true. If you are here and you're walking with Jesus. See, these people who saw this, they would have felt that something new is happening. that there's a new day dawning. Jesus is saying, though, to them, you think that's cool? Do you think that's cool? Watch me go to the cross and secure your lasting joy.